have heard a lot of people saying that a lot of journalists are very angry at Metacritic score, but from what I've read, there isn't that much anger at The Last of Us 2's Metacritic score. There's a lot of confusion, and a lot of misplaced confusion, so I thought, hey, even though none of them will ever watch this video, I am gonna have a conversation with them. So the first one that I'm gonna be addressing is The Last of Us Part 2. What's the problem here exactly? Well, the problem is that Paul Tassi is less than halfway into the game right now, so he's kinda commenting on his information about the game with less than halfway into the game mark. And he is also saying that a lot of people couldn't have gotten that much further than him because it didn't release in United States that long time ago. And when everything opened for people to, like, you know, be able to review and score the game on Metacritic, that at most people would have had half a day with it in US, and it didn't release that much time ago in other continents either, though other continents had like full half a day more, if not more. Meaning that A, it is feasible that somebody would have been playing at about 20 hours before they hit the review parts, and B, it is also feasible that they could have seen somebody play the game a bit earlier than when it released. I sure as hell seen a lot of streamers recently, and I do know a lot about the game without ever playing it. I mean, just from my subscription feed, at least 3 people were playing it. One was playing it with a completely open mind and is upset about it. One was kinda hate playing it, and about 12-hour mark he was like, this game isn't that bad, I mean, it's kind of 5 or 6, and then by the time he finished, he was ready to throw it out the window and is making a review right now. Shout out to Upper Echelon Gamers, he's gonna be releasing his review of The Last of Us 2 soon. He did 2 giant streams of that game. He is done with the game by today. Like today minus 12 hours or so, because I am recording this video quite late, and one person is still seemingly impressed by it, but he didn't get that far all that yet. So yes, despite the fact that I don't own the game, in maybe a single day since official release, I have seen 2 full playthroughs of it hit my subscription feed on YouTube. That is not to say how much people even saw it being streamed on Twitch, so yeah, the people could have gotten a lot further than you did, Paul Tassi, and you should probably continue with the game. But in any ways, he was kinda trying to explain it from his current encounters, what the score could have came from. So first he was like, to death. What impetus for anger in these early reviews is plot point that I'm willing to say that many players have probably reached. I'm talking of course about Joel's brutal murder at the hands of Abby and her WLFF, form of Firefly contingent, where he's captured and beaten to death right in front of Ellie. It is of course a shocking moment. It is also not terribly surprising if you ask me. Yes, I heard the leaks, but well before that even happened, the very first trailer showcased that Ellie was on the warpath on to get revenge. From the first moment, it seemed pretty clear to me that it was likely that some group had killed Joel, and even if Joel did appear in some spots later on, I figured that those were either flashbacks or imagined appearances. I was half right at least. I simply disagree with the notion that killing the character you like is automatically a bad story decision. Well, Paul, nobody's implying that it's a bad story decision to kill a character that a person like. Does anyone remember the ending to The Walking Dead Season 1? The main character died. People loved the main character, but they still rated the game highly. A lot of criticism against Joel's death is coming from the fact that Joel has been reduced to complete moron, because he couldn't sense a danger coming in a locked room full of angry people, while previously he could sense danger coming when he saw somebody asking for help in the middle of the road in the previous game, and he told Ellie that no, that person isn't even injured, and they were trying to escape that situation. This scene had to specifically make him dumber and drop his guard in order to kill him, making for pretty piss poor writing. The fact that it was a favorite character of people's getting murdered was just kinda cherry on top, really. On top of that, you have a trailer that was definitely faking it. They replaced young Joel's model with an old Joel's model to try and trick you to think that Joel is still around, and they also replaced Jesse with Joel's model, giving Jesse's line to Joel in the trailer to once again kind of trick you in believing that Joel is still around. On that alone, I would expect a lot of people to be very, very, very angry with the game. I mean, who loves false advertisement in a narrative-driven game being fed to them? I know that there has been articles from Kotaku going, oh, hey, look how clever it was that they did that. No, that's not cleverness. That is straight-on deception. I would have expected a negative reaction based on that alone. 2. The agenda. Let me give you a helpful hint. If your negative review of The Last of Us 2 based on anywhere from 0 from 30 hours of playtime includes the words agenda, feminism, SJW, woke, pandering, or political correctness, you have already lost this argument. Or perhaps read what the people's argument is. Most of this will be towards the character of Abby and not towards any other queer character. You also might hear the word agenda coming from queer people as well, because the game didn't please anyone on any side, and if you listen to the people on the left, the queer, the LGBTQ plus people, one part that they note is problematic is just how heavy the violence is against queer people in this game, almost seeming like Neil is anti-LGBTQ because you kinda can't believe that he might want to do that to these people with just how much violence he has, put on them. So the word agenda will be used by both sides. Perhaps read the full argument. The common refrain I'm already hearing is people saying it's not about that, it's about the story, and yet there are hundreds of those user reviews that all cite one or all of the terms saying that Naughty Dog is pushing some sort of agenda because these characters exist in the game. 12 hours in, that's literally all that happens. Ellie is gay, she has a girlfriend who is her traveling companion. In the first half of the game, the only commentary at all about any of this other than the mere existence of these characters is Ellie calling a guy a bigot who made a big deal of her kissing Dina. The guy apologizes, he makes them sandwiches, the end. Well, perhaps you should continue playing. Also, if people had issues with Ellie being gay, you would think that those issues would have arisen in the previous released DLC. I sorta had an issue with it, but based on the fact that Ellie seemed to have been showing attraction towards guys in the game before, so you kinda thinking, is she bi, or did they rewrite the character by the time the DLC came out? And I've heard some people complaining that DLC didn't include a lot of gameplay, but it still scored very highly. People in general didn't have an issue with Ellie being queer. If that was the issue, then surely we would have seen this before this point. Kotaku writes an article of being also very confused about Metacritic page score of user reviews for The Last of Us 2. The user scores, meanwhile, sit an abysmal 3.5 out of 10 based on over 31,000 reviews and counting, over 20,000 which are negative. All of these numbers are meaningless, says Kotaku. Much of this was likely review bombing, a practice in which people intentionally flood a game with negative reviews. Forbes noted that the game had over 5,000 user reviews only half a day into release, suggesting unless people are doing blitzing speedruns and then immediately going to Metacritic to post angry 0 out of 10 reviews, something fishy is clearly going on. Well, both Kotaku and Forbes, maybe you should go and read a few of these reviews, because the ones that I saw were fairly informative. A vocal contingent of players have been set against The Last of Us Part 2 since 2018 E3 trailer showed lead character Ellie in a lesbian relationship, and even more joined the fray following April's leaks. I have not seen that big of an amount of people complaining about Ellie's relationship in 2018, honestly. There were quite a few of unhappy people after April's leaks because April's leaks made the game look absolutely atrociously bad. And they kinda ended up being true. Other negative reviews are more reasoned, taking complaints with the game's story, citing plot holes and unlikable characters. Unfortunately, this sequel destroys the remarkable achievements of the first game, wrote one reviewer. Once you finished it, literally it has been for nothing, wrote another. Many players disliked what the game does to some of its beloved characters, with one writing that the character's story was a complete insult to the character. Well then, Kotaku, please make up your mind. Are user reviews legitimate or not legitimate? In all of these cases, however, both the critical and user scores on Metacritic seem to paint at least some reasonable picture of these games' receptions. They are talking about Mass Effect 3, Mass Effect Andromeda, Anthem, Fallout 76 having not the greatest reviews from critics and from the users, while The Last of Us 2 is having glowing reviews from the critics and fairly bad reviews from the users. Whether The Last of Us 2's mind-bending amount of negative reviews are from players predisposed to hate the game or those who legitimately found it lacking, the discrepancy between the critical and user scores is notable. Yes, Kotaku, and it makes people make up their minds that the critics were indeed bought, or at least told, or at least understood that they can't say that much negative if they want to continue to get game keys from Sony to review and the permission to review before the game releases. You see, this is the issue with the journalist bit of the internet. You guys kind of need those early reviews to survive, to generate clicks. Sony is absolutely 100% aware of that. They are aware that you need it, so even if they don't threaten you, even if they don't outright go, oh, we'll pull the keys, you kind of assume that they're not gonna give you another early access key unless you give it a good review. So you try to give it review. Doesn't matter if you were bought directly or not. Someone looking at critical scores alone would believe the game was widely beloved, only to be faced with an onslaught of negative user reviews that might lead even the most skeptical reader to believe something was amiss on the critical end of things. That aside, the sheer amount of noise that the user reviews would make it even more difficult to tell how players actually feel about the game. Metacritic, for all it become a supposedly vital metric for assessing a game's quality, here shows a bunch of meaningless numbers and a lot of rage, very little of which paint any picture of how players are actually finding the game. But it does paint the picture absolutely perfectly fine. Even if you're saying that they're review bombing the game, you have to find the reasons why. Review bombs don't happen with happy customers. If the customers are unhappy enough for there to be a huge backlash, you kind of have to investigate the reasons as to why, meaning that it does paint a picture of customer dissatisfaction and customer unhappiness. I think that is what you're supposed to take away from it. If you do want a better look at it, I would suggest watching streamers play it. I would suggest hearing people on YouTube review the game. I think that gives you a better insight into what the game is. Kotaku kind of arrives at the same kind of conclusion, saying read a review from some sites you trust, ask a friend what they think of it so far, or watch a bit of game on YouTube before you buy it. I would say, yes, that is wise advice from Kotaku, except that I wouldn't just base my opinion on a journalist review or paper. I would be more likely to base my review based on what people that I trust have said, if they are articulating what they're saying and what they're saying makes sense. If you're gonna give it a super negative review, I normally want to know why you think that way, and thankfully a lot of people on the internet are articulating themselves pretty well, even on the Metacritic page, so you can see what is wrong with the game for a lot of people, and then you can make up your mind whether you can live with what is wrong with the game. That is how you use user reviews. Now, there is a very nice post in here saying, giving the general reactions I've seen around the net the last 24 hours, I don't think that's the case this time. these are the people talking about Gamergaters or like review bombs and things like that. And this is one of those persons, like I said, some queer people don't like this game too. I also don't think it's purely homophobes or Gamergaters either. The first game resonated emotionally with a lot of people, and it's hard to watch characters you grew to love outright suffering. For me personally, I'm disturbed that a queer woman, Ellie, seems to suffer most when she's embracing her queerness. There's representation, yeah, but it's wearing into outright exploitation. It's gross, honestly, and I say that as a woman who veers pretty hard on the left and was thrilled to see Ellie having her first queer kiss in Left Behind. Super exciting to me personally, as I spent my teens resisting my own bisexual nature. I also find it really disturbing that people seem to think that a woman is only capable of being objectified if she's traditionally attractive. I also think a lot of these reviews are coming via Twitch streams. A couple of the bigger guys had 100,000 plus watching their streams, so a person doesn't necessarily have to have played the game to have experienced the story. Lena is absolutely right, and like I said, this isn't even the case that only one person on one political spectrum dislikes the game. The story is almost universally regarded to be bad, and the game is almost universally regarded to be too violent to be fun to play, and kinda disturbing and hard to watch. It's not just, oh, it's the Gamergaters, or oh, it's the homophobes. It's a spectrum of people all saying that the story's pretty bad. You have to pull conclusions from that, and I don't know why it's so surprising for journalists. The last person that I wanted to address, she made her tweets go private, so I am using a Wayback Machine, but it's Stephanie Bendixson. She has been floating around my feed recently, mostly for her takes on The Last of Us Part 2. She is a TV host, presenter, I want to say. I actually forgot what she is, but she's an Australian TV something. And her statements were, "How naive I am to play something as intense, harrowing, beautiful, and utterly terrifying as The Last of Us Part 2 and expect gamers to love its maturity and innovation instead of complaining about featuring a gay female lead as an apparently unrealistic SGW pandering apocalypse hero." Stephanie Bendixson, I haven't heard a single complaint about Ellie being gay all the way since the DLC. The DLC has established Ellie as gay. The fact that the Part 2 still says that Ellie has a wife, not a single person found a problem with that I know of. Like, fucking grow up and appreciate what something as nuanced and masterful as this is doing to set the creative and technical bar for our industry. Games don't exist to appease some bullshit, pathetic male fantasy. Lara Croft has pants now and smaller boobs. Get over it. I'm just looking around, searching for that voice that was complaining about The Last of Us 2 because Ellie doesn't have big enough boobs. What? There's honestly nothing out there quite like this franchise. It's groundbreaking and layered and affecting in so many different ways, and yet people out there deign to tantrum over the fact that it follows the stories of a diverse group of people. Get the fuck over yourselves. People are having issue with one diverse person in the whole story, and that's because you had to play half your time as them. There is another similar diverse person, and the only complaints about them that I've heard is that people are very sorry about how badly and brutally they have died. That's the complaining. I have heard complaining about ultra-violence. I have heard complaining about the fact that the story seems to be very shallow and written as if it was written by a teenager. I have heard complaining about the fact that a lot of queer characters are being killed off. I have heard complaining about the fact that you play as Abby for half the game and she is not likable. I have heard the complaints about Joel's death. I have not heard the complaints about the queer people exist in this game. Once again, Ellie has been established as gay for a very long time. Complaining about her being gay took place those years, not right now. Right now, people ain't really complaining that Ellie is gay. Sometimes I'm proud to be part of gaming community, and other times straight up hate it. Way to take us all 2 steps back. No, I think it's Neil Druckmann that kinda did that with writing the story to begin with. I don't I don't think that people just disliking the story is doing anything about taking a steps back, honestly, Stephanie. And this is how life is. I mean, I will call myself a gamer. I will attribute myself to the gaming community. I don't need to share every single popular opinion. I don't need to share every single unpopular opinion. That is what happens when you attribute a hobby to yourself. You don't have to be identical to every other person that partake in said hobby. If I like to read books, it doesn't mean that my opinions will match 100% as the other people that like to read books, which is why we tend to have discussions, which is why you tend to have polarizing opinions, which is why you tend to hear different reviews from different people. That is how people are. They will all interpret what they like and dislike differently, and the general public will veer closer to one or closer to another, and it's kind of okay if you disagree with them. Just don't go out of your way to insult them. That's about it. And that is gonna be it for tonight, folks, about this topic. I did not find that big amount of hatred from journalists, but some of them seem to be very confused, and I don't know if they're being confused. Why? Why? What's the confusion? What's the confusion? People generally didn't like the game. That's it. That's the general consensus. I don't see why you're confused. If you're confused as to why people didn't like the game, you're free to go and read their reviews and figure out why they didn't like the game. Or, as I would say to the Forbes journalist, you're free to continue playing and make up your own opinions on yourself. You don't need to insult anyone. You don't need to question it. If you want to question anything, question why the critics gave it 10 out of 10. That would be the question to ask. That would be the right question to ask. But anyways, if you like my content, please subscribe, and I hope to return here tomorrow with more videos. Toodaloo.